I read the blog just yesterday and it really had a quote in it that I thought really summed up what juncture we're at this point in time. This image also in a way sums it up because the screen, the multi-screen experience that the whole world is now embracing is changing so much of how consumers and the general population consume media, consume content, consume information, and live their lives. This quote is by a fellow named Chris Messina. Now, Chris is the godfather of the hashtag. He worked at Twitter, and he's the very first person to use the hashtag. And Chris wrote, "I'll be the first," this is in a longer blog, so I've sort of captured a paragraph. "I'll be the first, maybe the second, to admit that we're no longer living in the golden era of social networking." Kind of an interesting opening statement because we would have thought that the golden era of social networking was now, but in his context it's moved past that. "We've migrated away from the mouse and keyboard era of computing and replaced them with glossy, touchable surfaces that we carry around in our pockets and alert us to all of our friends' most recent doings. We have access to our contacts, to information, and to superpowers that we've never had before." I like that word, superpowers, because it just has a great connotation. "And not only are we starting to take all this for granted, there's a younger generation growing up without any conception of a time before Siri and a living post-browser." And that really is setting a scene I'd like you to carry with you as we think about what we're doing with digital. Before Siri, post-browser. I even heard someone yesterday just talk about their computer, their laptop, desktop computer, and going to swipe it. You know, it's starting to change a lot of behaviours and the way people think. So we should embrace that and keep that in the back of our minds. The topics that I've divided this talk into, the first one is content marketing, and I'm sure lots of you have read and heard a fair bit about content marketing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in that space, my experience at Chartered Accountants in content marketing. Secondarily, customer journey. And when we talk about the future of digital, I think the customer journey is a key element of how you plan for and then execute against a communications plan to reach out to a customer. So it's become, I think, a vital tool in the mix of methodologies to reach an audience. And thirdly, digital disruption. And I'm focusing in that little part of the talk on fundraising and mobility. So that's just going to have a few interesting things that are happening in that particular space. So what's content marketing? Well, there's a definition from the Content Marketing Institute that I believe pretty well sums it up. Creating and distributing valuable, relevant and consistent content to attract and acquire a clearly defined audience with the objective of driving profitable customer action. And I've split that up into its components to try and identify that you can do each of those discreetly and you can have other campaigns or other ideas or methodologies to achieve some of those. But content marketing kind of wraps them all up in one. And if you can set out to achieve that when you are thinking of how to approach content marketing, then you're well on the way to achieving it properly. And what I'm going to talk about is some examples of brands that are doing that and some techniques to get you there. I thought the best way for me to start was to talk about my own content strategy because I'm a great believer in walking the talk when it comes to digital. And as you can see, I've got quite an array of digital networks, platforms, channels that I use myself to engage with an audience. And I just want to quickly give you a snapshot of what that looks like. So on my website, I would use that for promotion, publishing, digital marketing, thought leadership. And I've got about 1,000 subscribers to the blog that I have on that. I started that blog about 4 or 5 years ago on WordPress, and I've since migrated it over to my website. But it takes time and it takes effort to build up that kind of an audience. On Twitter, I use it for promotion as a resource and to connect with people. A lot of the people that you meet in these sort of circumstances, in business environments, if they're on Twitter, connecting with those people is a great way to keep in touch. And I've got over 2,000 followers through that particular channel. On LinkedIn, it's a channel for me to promote myself. It's a resource, again, for connections. Publishing now, LinkedIn has become a really valuable resource for all types of publishing. And I'd recommend, especially with this particular audience, to treat LinkedIn as a very serious channel. Sharing content that you see, read, watch online. And I've got over 700 connections there. SlideShare, I think it's underrated at the moment, an underrated platform, but I think it offers a lot of value. I'll be putting this presentation in a slimmed down form, probably cut up into various components onto SlideShare at some point in the near future, and again use that as a way to share that content with my followers. So it's a great resource. There's a lot of wonderful presentations on there on any topic that you care to choose. So I'd recommend, if you haven't looked at SlideShare, to do so. Pinterest, I was probably late to Pinterest. It certainly took off about 2 years ago in the States, and it really is quite a valuable resource, especially now that some of the browsers offer you the opportunity to pin something direct from a browser. You don't even need to visit the site. Right click on an image and bang it straight onto Pinterest. And you can build community, you can build interest around a lot of different topic areas in that way. And it's not only for images now, it also carries video as well. YouTube, of course. Part of the reason of filming today is to put this into a cut down form and eventually put it up on my own YouTube channel, but also using YouTube in interesting ways. So when the Soccer World Cup was on, I kind of went around YouTube, grabbed all of the big brands who were doing Soccer World Cup themed advertising and put them together in a playlist, and then shared that playlist out with my network. So you can curate content, you can aggregate content that's already out there in different and interesting ways to provide for your audience. Google Plus, it's a strange one, Google Plus. There's a lot of debate about its value. If you want to be found in search, if you want your Google identity to be as strong as it can be, you really must be in Google Plus. So that's a key reason. What they do with it is a big question. In fact, the blog that I took that quote from earlier was actually about Google Plus. That fellow Chris worked there, and he had a point of view about Google's need to stay in that space. And finally, my most recent blog I created called the Burning Platform blog, which is specifically about digital disruption. I've only been running that for a couple of months, but thought leadership around the whole space of digital disruption. So that in a nutshell is sort of my content strategy, and I'm constantly thinking about how I'm going to publish content or curate content to spread out through those networks. And I think if you can, obviously then you have to tailor those messages to suit whatever it is your position is in the market, what you want to say, what audience are you talking to, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. There are some other brands out there, just for your own reference. Red Bull, everyone knows about the jump from space, for argument's sake, the Red Bull air race, Red Bull videos around snow sports, surfing, car racing, etc. They're a content marketing company. Interestingly, they also run paid TV ads, but they really do spend most of their dollars in content marketing. Coca-Cola.com.au, if you go to that website now, it's not a corporate website anymore. It is full of stories of people, of places, of the way Coca-Cola embraces its concept of happiness and what that means to everybody around the world. It's quite a dramatic shift for them as a company, instead of spending money on some of those amazing TV ads that we've seen over the years. GE is another brand that has used content in many different ways to tell stories, explain what they do in a healthcare space, but also in other industries they're in, like aerospace and engineering, etc. Denny's has an interesting story. If you look online, you'll see how they are very quirky. They're very different. They've got it's very old-fashioned, long-standing brand fast food in America, but they've reinvented themselves a little bit online by creating a real character, a personality that all of a sudden you go, oh, they're not so old-fashioned and daggy anymore, and starting to appeal to a younger audience. And American Express have had a great success with this open forum idea, which is targeting small business. You may have seen the promotion they ran in Australia not too long ago called the Small Business Saturday, which ran in the States last year. And that's what Open Forum is all about, helping small business. Obviously for Amex, their biggest Achilles heel is people handing it over in small business because of the high merchant charges. So they had to address that particular issue, and this whole Open Forum program exactly does that. By providing content for small businesses to help them in their business, to do better business, to find better ways to market themselves. And the key in that is community. What they did is they've used the small business community to share with each other, share ideas. It's not all American Express telling you what to do or telling you how to do things. It's actually bringing in the community to create a kind of it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once someone's got a great idea or approach or selling, you get that out there and you start to get the network to embrace that. What some lessons for brands who don't have the sort of budgets that a brand like a Nike or Red Bull or Chipotle have. So some of those were tell your biggest story. So find what it is that you're in business to do. What is your purpose to operate as an organisation, and tap into that, harness that, focus on that. Always come back to that, because if you can do that, you will start to build something that has a very strong meaning to the audience that you're talking to. Make it the backbone of everything you publish. Make it the reason why you are pushing that message out there. Don't make those things an afterthought. Let it lead. Cast your customer as the hero, not your brand. Thinking, how does your brand or organisation live in people's world? For membership organisations, and knowing my experience at Chartered Accountants, we used to say 80 to 90% of members never thought of us until subs time came around. How do you engage with them beyond that, oh, I've got to pay my subs now kind of thought? And there's something I'll talk about soon that touches on that, but it's those sorts of things that you need to really think, what's our purpose and how can we reach out to our members, and reimagine that content across different formats, channels and platforms. These are things that anyone can do. You don't need a big budget to create an enormous amount of content. I think people get caught up in well, if I'm going to do a content marketing strategy well, I need to do a lot of it. I don't believe that's essential. I think you need to do a few things well, and if you have the wherewithal to do more, then that's great. But just make sure the few things you do are doing well. You saw my wheel of content. I don't spend any money on any of that content. I produce it myself without, but I can put up a slide like that has got a lot of things going on. So it's not about how much money you spend. Really, it's really much more about the quality of the content that you're producing, and then how you decide to start to share that on your networks. So I found a really good guide to content marketing. It came from the UK government, and they have a slogan they called Oasis. That's their guide to campaign planning, and I've put the URL down there in the corner if you can read it, or I'll certainly share it around afterwards. But the Oasis steps bring order and clarity to planning campaigns. The aim is to help make the planning process simpler and easier to remember. And this might exist for 3 or 4 or 5 different audiences. A couple of slides which just give you a bit of a broad brush look at the different formats for content marketing. The channels where that content can be distributed, well, your website is probably the number one. the opportunity to do so much more on your website is now there and will return dividends significantly if it's done well. Microsites is obviously another content marketing, as I talked about Future Inc. Email is a content marketing channel. Really, it's probably one of the original content marketing channels. And then you've got the social channels. Obviously the Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You've got the App Store, the Play Store, so you can look at how your content can be in the palm of someone's hand, literally, when they need it. There's a phrase that you're all probably quite familiar with, content is king. And I think that still holds true, but there's a corollary to that, which is context is queen. Because content on its own really may not be relevant, be useful, be valuable. But when you put it in a context, that's when it starts to really take on a life of its own. So developing a strategy, set some goals, profile your audiences, select core messages, and embrace technology. So creating your story, what do you believe and what you do for others. That's the underlying idea behind creating your story. Set up an editorial calendar, emphasis on visual content. Listen and learn and adjust course when necessary. So there is a case for how do I make sure that what I'm doing today is still the right thing. We came up with a plan 6 months ago. You must think about how to adjust as necessary, and setting measurable outcomes, capture the data, which kind of comes back to the embracing technology discussion. What are you going to do to capture data in a CMS, in a CRM, with your emails that are sent out? What is the performance? How are you measuring and optimizing for the click-throughs and the open rates? And report. Reporting basically means someone is going to be asking, how is that going? How is that measured against the objectives? And you must always be able to close the loop on that and say, yes, this is what we're achieving. So just to close this section on content, you know what you want to say, you know what your audience is interested in, find the middle ground.